Welcome to Module 4 of Education 207, Designing Effective Lessons for All Learners. This module focuses on how lesson planning can meet the diverse needs of all learners. We'll explore strategies like differentiation and the Universal Design for Learning, also known as UDL, to ensure equitable access to learning. So the focus of Module 4 is lesson craft. All right, let's go ahead and jump in. These objectives are going to guide our learning today. You'll learn to recognize the many differences students bring into the classroom and how thoughtful planning supports diverse learning needs. So by the end of this module, you'll be able to identify how learner differences affect planning, explain the value of differentiation and UDL, and apply strategies for inclusive, proactive lesson design. Students bring varying abilities, preferences, and life experiences. Lesson planning must be responsive to these differences in order to provide meaningful access and engagement. So here are some of the differences that matter when we consider the planning that goes into preparing for every single lesson. Readiness levels. Basically, what this means is what are our students' current skill levels? What are their current knowledge levels? Where do we have maybe some gaps or perhaps even some misconceptions in their readiness? What are learning preferences of our students? These can include things such as visual learning, so giving them opportunities to see it in some sort of chart or model. Auditory learning, are we giving all of our students an opportunity to hear in a way that makes sense to them? So are we using video appropriately? Are we using talk to text to maybe read some of the more challenging text to the students? And then, of course, kinesthetic. Are we giving our students an opportunity to have hands-on experiences with the learning? Are we giving them an opportunity? We know that all students, all human beings need an opportunity to get up and move and sometimes even act out that learning. And then the next area of differences are student backgrounds. We understand that different culture, different regions of the country and the state are going to have different values and different means of expression. Language is a very big piece that our students can bring into the classroom. With more and more students needing support in learning English, this is definitely something we want to consider. But we also want to consider perhaps students who have speech needs. And so we want to consider those students who might be hard of hearing, deaf, and thinking about, are we providing an environment that speaks in their language to them? And then, of course, all of our learners have different experiences that they bring to the classroom. It affects their interests and it affects their values. So if you look at the right, this is a chart that you will see, or an infographic rather, that you will see as you progress through our program. We begin to use it quite a lot in our methods courses and our planning courses that are going to come after your 200 level courses. And these are some of the learner dimensions that kind of define those differences. So academic dispositions, educational history, everyday application, interest, language development, local collective. So this is sort of like the community that's supporting them. What is our learner motivation? Personal disposition, what are their personalities like? And then, of course, the support structure, the stakeholders that support them outside of the classroom, such as family and other community members. So now let's begin talking about how we consider these differences in our planning. Differentiation adjusts instruction based on students' needs. It's flexible and intentional. We adapt content, what students learn, process, how students learn, product, how students demonstrate learning, and then one more that's not here, but it's environment. We adapt the environment to help every student meet the learning goal. And in fact, I'm going to just take a moment and add environment. I think that might have been one that I just slipped my um, thank you for letting me slip that one in real quick right there. Let me just adjust this a little bit and we'll be perfect. So essentially what we're saying is based on student needs, not having these fixed ideas in our planning for grouping, for perhaps only teaching a lesson one way. And so that's what differentiation in planning looks like, is considering the content, the process, the product, and the environment. Sorry, that spacing is bothering me. I'm going to fix that right now. So now let's consider when we think about differentiation, adapting the content, process, product, and environment to adjust to our learners' needs. Now let's think about another way that we can consider learner differences, and that is going to be the universal design for learning. So what is UDL, or the universal design for learning? It's a proactive framework for designing accessible instruction. It's an approach that anticipates learner needs during the planning process. It's based on brain science and learner variability. It offers multiple means of engagement, multiple means of representation, and multiple means of action and expression. It's not an add-on or a common accommodation. It's a foundational design principle that's part of the framework of the planning process. So if you look to the right, you can see what some of these different multiple means when we talk about engagement, representation, and expression. You can see what some of these things are. For example, if we just look at the bullet points on the orange, multiple means of action and expression. So this could mean options for physical action. So as I mentioned earlier, if we build that into our lesson from the beginning, then we are already giving those students who need an opportunity to move, that kinesthetic learner, we're giving them an opportunity, maybe to, as I mentioned, act out. Instead of just reading, a drama, we're going to actually assign some roles. They're going to maybe act out an act in front of the class with props and, physical movement. So that's just one example, but options for those expressive skills and fluency to practice language and to practice expressing their learning. So that could be through class discussion. It could also be through, perhaps reciting a poem or something. And then options for executive functions. So that decision-making process. For example, if we're teaching a math lesson, do we ever actually give them the opportunity to practice what they're learning? Maybe through some manipulatives in which they are having to make decisions about how best to demonstrate how to solve an equation or something like that. So that's just one of the categories that I kind of went over and gave some examples for you. But you can see that multiple means of representation, the purple block, there are options for perception, options for language and symbols, and options for comprehension. The blue, providing multiple means of engagement. This is, are we giving them options for recruitment, interest? So are we tapping into some of their interests? Are we giving them opportunities to sustain their effort and persistence? So maybe some more project-based learning with some extended projects. And then some options for self-regulation. Are we building in student voice and choice into the lesson? So these are just, it's a high-level overview when you actually jump into lesson planning. And then as we move forward for some future modules, these are going to be refined for you, and we'll kind of get into the weeds a bit more on what these are in this course and then in your future courses as well. So we want to just take a moment and we want to compare and contrast the universal design for learning and differentiation, just so that you can understand the two. While both approaches promote inclusion, the universal design for learning starts at the design level to offer flexibility to learners. Differentiation fine tunes instruction once students' needs are identified. And so UDL is considered more proactive, while differentiation is considered more reactive or responsive. UDL is based on variability. And so there are assumptions that we make about our learners, and we're automatically building these things in. Differentiation is going to actually be based on evidence or observed need of our students. So again, it's more responsive to the specific students in our classroom. The universal design for learning, the more proactive one, it's going to automatically offer options for all. It's going to automatically put them in place into the lesson planning process, whereas differentiation is going to target support for specific students. So for example, if there are some students who we know in our class have some specific, maybe physical impairments that would impede their participation in the lesson, we're going to tap into the already identified options in the UDL, and we're going to figure out, like, okay, which of these choices would be best for maybe the student who maybe cannot physically do some of the things that my other students can do. What options am I providing for this student to have an equal opportunity to learn and to participate in the class? So again, UDL is more proactive. It's the design process of the lesson where we're automatically building these things into the lesson. Differentiation is much more customized based on the learners in front of us. So again, UDL is more proactive, differentiation is more reactive or responsive. Both are necessary, though. I think that's important for me to say. Both are necessary in effective lesson design and lesson planning and lesson execution. So now let's talk about lesson craft, which is what this module has been all about, and kind of sum up what it is and what our learning should be. It means building lessons that flex and adapt. We look for barriers before students encounter them and embed supports from the start, just like architects designing accessible buildings. And then, of course, once those lessons are in flow and based on observable need in the classroom and perhaps some assessment data, we might even have to circle back to a lesson or a unit of instruction, maybe reteaching, maybe differentiating in a way that we did not the first go around. So it's an ongoing process, but we really try to craft lessons from the get-go that are going to increase that flexibility and accessibility to improve the accessibility for all students. So it includes designing with flexibility, embedding choice and voice, scaffolding for diverse readiness levels. So all the way from the student who might need some more support with the concepts. Perhaps we have some students with learning needs, and they're going to need more scaffolding and maybe more repetitions, all the way to the advanced student or the gifted student who doesn't need as many repetitions or doesn't need as much practice with a skill. So we're thinking about all of those students, and they're all in the same room with us. And then, of course, checking for barriers in content, delivery, or assessment. Is there something that would prevent a learner in my room from understanding, from expressing their learning, or even just asking a question sometimes? So checking for those things. So now let's take just a moment to kind of review what our outcomes are for this lesson. Module 4 supports our ability as teachers to craft lessons that are equitable, inclusive, and intentional. We want to use what we've learned in this module to observe classes When you are in the field and you're going to be doing your field placements, we want you to really reflect on how that teacher has planned for the diverse learners' needs. How is the teacher responding to perhaps observed needs for differentiation, like those in the moment changes that the teacher may be making, but also how has the teacher programmed those things in from the beginning of that lesson design, which would be UDL. We want to see both UDL and differentiation in action. And then you are going to have an opportunity to practice your understanding of these terms on a Module 4 quiz. So more information is going to be available on your Canvas website. Your instructor is going to give it to you in either in the face-to-face or online format. So make sure that you use your materials from this module to put them into action on a quiz. Additionally, your instructor may have other activities for you to do to learn more and apply more of your learning for Module 4. So don't forget to check out Canvas. Make sure you email your instructor if you have any questions regarding this week's content or expectations. Have a wonderful week.